Welcome to Unlock the Magic of Psychotherapy. This course is designed to support you in creating more impact with your clients with less effort so that you experience bigger breakthroughs in your clinical practice with less depletion and less burnout. And so, as we get started here, I'd like to share a story with you about a therapist who was consulting with me on a case, and they described their client as talking really quickly for long stretches of time without pausing and without taking a breath. And the therapist would reflect what the client was saying. And anytime they did, the client would respond by retreating into their mind, going back into their meaning making, sharing their narratives, and talking really, really quickly. And anytime the therapist asked the client what they noticed in their body, the client would respond by interpreting themselves and sharing more self analysis and talking really quickly. And the therapist said to me, I feel so drained when I sit with this client. I'm doing everything I can to pull this client into their body, and they want to stay in their head. I don't look forward to seeing this client. I'm so burned out. I don't know what to do. And I'm wondering how many of you can relate to this, where anything that you try with a client, it doesn't seem to work, and you are using all of your tools and all of your energy to try to support them in changing, and they seem stuck. I want to invite you to write down a word that describes how you feel in those moments. I've heard some therapists describe feeling frustrated, incompetent, exhausted, or having brain fog. So just take a moment to write down how you feel in those moments. This therapist was really surprised when I said to them that it wasn't the client who was causing you to feel depleted. It's your attempt to change the client that's having you feel so drained. Anytime a therapist uses our own energy to try to be a catalyst for the client's change, we will always end up feeling depleted, and subsequently, clients will seem stuck and will feel less effective. So before we go on, I want to introduce myself to you. I'm Harmony Kwiker, and I've been a psychotherapist since 2007, and I've really dedicated my career to studying and practicing and teaching the art of transpersonal counseling, where mystical experiences are welcome in the therapeutic container, and where we listen to the client's innate spirituality and innate wisdom as the guide for their healing. I'm also a visiting instructor at Naropa University, where I teach Gestalt therapy. I'm an approved clinical supervisor, and I love supervising transpersonal counselors. I'm the author of 3 books. My first book is a memoir, Reveal, Embody the True Self Beyond Trauma and Conditioning. My second book is a self-help book, Align, Living and Loving from the True Self. And my third book is a textbook, The Awakened Therapist, Spirituality, Consciousness, and Subtle Energy in Gestalt Therapy. And I'm also the founder of the Institute for Spiritual Alignment, where we offer holistic therapy trainings to awaken transformation in yourself, your clients, and the world. So, this old paradigm of therapist as expert really sets us up to give our energy away and deplete our resources. It's just not sustainable. And so, here's what's causing therapists to feel burned out. We think our clients need to be different than they are. Now, this might be surprising because it might seem like the context of therapy is creating a space for our clients to change, which that is still true. But when we think our clients need to be different than they are, we actually inhibit that change, and we end up feeling more burned out, more exhausted, more depleted. We're swimming in our clients' emotions and thoughts. Now, this happens when we are trying to fix or change or offer our clients advice. We cross over the contact boundary, which I like to call the sacred boundary. And anytime we cross over the sacred boundary, we end up swimming in our clients' emotions and thoughts and carrying their burden for them. And of course, we feel burned out and we experience compassion fatigue. We think countertransference is our work to process rather than honoring it as intuitive insight. Now, the old paradigm of psychotherapy has taught us this, taught us that countertransference is something that we need to go work on, that it's ours. However, in this model, countertransference is actually intuitive insight from the field of the container. It actually is the therapeutic container itself. And when we learn how to honor our countertransference as intuition, the magic of psychotherapy is unlocked in a really profound way. We try to give our clients their money's worth. Now, this one I hear a lot of therapists say, we care about our clients. We want them to experience value and appreciate and enjoy the time that they have and really see the benefit of coming to therapy. But when we work to give our clients their money's worth, we tend to work too hard for work that actually isn't ours to do. And so instead of creating a space for our clients to do the therapeutic work that they're there to do, we end up doing a lot of that work for them. Our personality engages with their personality. Now, from a transpersonal counseling approach, we are not engaging from our personality with our client's personality. But in a traditional model, there's this idea that we are the expert, which comes from our personality, trying to be the expert for our clients. And if we're seeing them as their personality, that's really where we get hooked into trying to change them. And it prevents really the mystical and the transcendent from opening into the therapeutic space. We're analyzing, interpreting, or trying to rearrange our clients in our world. Now, this is exhausting because it's impossible. That is not our work to do. A client will change from their sovereign will, from their choice, and from their desire. So the magic of therapy is dimmed when the therapist is the helper and the client needs to be fixed. This paradigm really dims the beauty of the magic that can unfold in a sacred therapeutic container. And along with our feelings of depletion, this old paradigm ignores the client's innate wisdom and spirituality as the guide to their healing. And this component is really, really important for change to occur therapeutically. When a client is honored in this deep way where we fully trust their innate wisdom and their deeper knowing and their inherent movement towards health, they will find their way organically and naturally and in their own way and in their own time. But when they arrive back home in themselves, it is pure magic when they return to their true nature. So, part of what is inhibiting the magic of psychotherapy from being unlocked in the old paradigm of psychotherapy is that unknowingly clients are not feeling safe in a container where a therapist is trying to fix them and change them and offer them advice. Because the amygdala, the emotional center of the brain, is constantly scanning the environment for threats to safety. And the threats to safety that the amygdala is looking for include judgment, incongruence, a physical threat, and the unknown. And so, as you can imagine, a client who is being analyzed and sort of dissected, their amygdala is feeling judged. Even if their mind doesn't say this person is judging me, there's some piece of their nervous system that feels on guard because they're sensing the judgment of this interpretation. So anytime that you try to change your client, their amygdala senses judgment. Something's wrong with me. I need to be changed. They're judging me. Anytime you interpret or analyze your client, their amygdala senses judgment. They're trying to figure out what's wrong with me. They're judging me. Yeah. Anytime you position yourself as the expert of your client's process, the amygdala senses judgment. And anytime you see any aspect of your client as bad or wrong, their amygdala senses judgment. And this is true even when the client is asking us for our opinion. So even if their mind is looking to us for the answer, when we respond by giving them our advice or our expertise, their amygdala still senses that as judgment. Instead, we can be curious about where that movement is coming from inside of them that has them look outside of themselves for an expert rather than listening to themselves. And this will really shift the way the therapeutic process unfolds. So, what we're really talking about here is shifting from traditional psychotherapy to a mindfulness-based transpersonal approach. And so, mindfulness-based transpersonal counseling integrates mindfulness practices, so increasing awareness, and this happens in real time in therapy, where a client is sharing their narratives, and we invite them to close their eyes and notice the narrative, bringing awareness to the mind without trying to change it. And it's integrating this mindfulness approach with a transpersonal approach to counseling where we're not engaging with our client's personality from our personality. This is a present moment approach to counseling where a client is seen as whole, all symptoms are seen as adaptive, and all healing is viewed as generated from the client's innate spirituality. We aim to enhance awareness and facilitate personal growth by exploring deeper dimensions of the psyche, including spiritual and mystical experiences. Instead of changing a client, in this nonviolent approach to counseling, we support clients to be more of who they are. When a client is invited to be more of who they are, change occurs organically. So, for example, even if a client has a strong voice of self-loathing, when we invite them to go into the phenomenology of that self-loathing, they become more of who they are, and that way they can find their way through whatever is stuck, whatever is inhibiting them from being fully present in their aliveness, in their embodied vitality. So I'm wondering how many of you have experienced in meditation where you close your eyes and your mental chatter seems to occupy the entirety of your experience. Your thoughts are so loud and so big that you can't quite see beyond them. Just want to invite you to write down a word to describe that experience. And now I'm wondering how many of you stayed with your contemplative practice and eventually learned how to soften your inner gaze and open to the expansive space around your thoughts. Just take a moment to write down a word that describes that experience where you open into the infinite, expansive quality beyond your thoughts. So, what I'm pointing to here is where we're seated in ourselves when we hold space. So, when we are in our contemplative practice, we can have this experience of seeing our thoughts and shifting beyond. But we can also do that in the seat of clinician. So, here, the first level of awareness is called the ordinary mind or ordinary awareness. And this is where our conceptual knowledge lives. Everything we learned in graduate school, all the tools in our toolbox are in our ordinary mind, our thought-based reality. This also houses our hyper-identified self. And this is the place where we judge and we need to be the expert. And when we hold space from our ordinary mind, right? We are seeing a client as a separate other, somebody to fix or change or figure out across from us over there. And it can have a session feel sort of gridlocked with thinking and with thought-based reality. The next level of awareness is called subtle attunement or subtle awareness. And this is direct experience to the here and now. And this is where we attune to emotions and attune to sensations and see our client's expression. And we are generally mindful of what's happening right now. So instead of following our client's narratives outside of the room or into the past, into the future, we're actually present with our client. We're noticing how they're expressing themselves as they talk. How do they seem to us? And similarly, we can invite them to attune to themselves and their subtle senses in this way also to come into direct experience. And this is one shift away from the ordinary mind. Sometimes this can feel like a flashlight or a spotlight onto the here and now. But in this moment, we let go of the ordinary mind and we are present with sensations. We're present with what's happening right now. The next level of awareness is called awake awareness. And this is where our awareness-based knowing dwells. Similar to when we're sitting in meditation, when we open to that infinite quality beyond our mind, this is where awareness-based knowing lives. This is the welcoming and loving quality of our essence. It's the formless dimension beyond the mind, beyond energy. It's infinite, expansive, and innately wise. It doesn't see anything as good or bad. It really has the quality to welcome and love everything that is here. And when we hold space from awake awareness, our mind still might track, still might think, but it comes from a different place because we're really rested in our awake awareness. And then the next stage of consciousness or awareness is called true self awareness. And this is where universal consciousness dwells, that consciousness that is interconnected to all of life, where spiritual intelligence can enter into the mind, into thought patterns, into the body, into other perspectives, into darkness and light. It's the spontaneous expression of life moving through us in alignment with universal wisdom. And we can also hold space from true self-awareness. And the practice happens in real time where we shift away from our thought-based reality, we come into direct experience, we begin to rest in awake awareness, and then we can enter into true self-awareness. So this is an image of a client who's arrived to a session hyper-identified with their ordinary mind, their thought-based reality, and disowning their authentic experience. So they might disown their emotions, they might disown certain thoughts, impulses, and they are hyper-identified with their mind. And I call this the line of distortion because vitality isn't moving through them in alignment with universal wisdom. And this sort of polarity of hyper-identification with the mask and disowning the shadow can cause this sort of thwarting and blockage in a person's system. And so if we arrive to a session hyper-identified with our ordinary mind and engaging from our personality, we're also disowning our authentic experience and we're engaging with our clients from our identified self with their identified self. And this will really inhibit the magic of psychotherapy from being opened in this really mystical and profound way. This is why these practices are so important, to let go of our personality and open into an infinite quality that is beyond our personal identity. If we arrive to a session and we practice resting in awake awareness, we can meet our clients at the sacred boundary where our presence and our interventions trust their innate wisdom as the guide for their healing. So in this image, here we are, breathing up and down our midline. We're connected to the core of our being. We're resting in infinite awareness. We're not trying to solve our client, trying to fix them or figure them out or use certain frameworks to map onto them. We're just present with them in awareness while we're also listening to them quite deeply. We actually can listen and track more deeply from awake awareness than from the ordinary mind. And our presence, when we are holding space in this way, has the capacity to welcome our client as they are. So our client might be in distress, they might be in suffering, and we can welcome them as they are without trying to change them. We can trust them to find their way through. And when honored in this way, clients will learn to shift to awake awareness, and this is through our direction and through our support, and they'll discover their way back home to themselves. So it's not that we're not doing anything, but it is really important about the place within ourselves from which we do the therapeutic interventions. So in psychotherapy, conceptual knowing is really important. We need to gather the frameworks, we need to gather the tools, and this is part of the learning of how to be a psychotherapist. The mind is important, especially in tracking client narratives and mapping their patterns. We need our mind. However, when we only hold space from our mind, a session feels dull, we feel depleted, and there's a lack of transformation that happens in the therapeutic space. When we let go of our thoughts and open to awareness-based knowing, we open to the magic of infinite wisdom. Thoughts emerge spontaneously and without effort. And more importantly, the thoughts that do emerge come from the inherent intelligence of the field itself, not from our ego. Similar to meditating alone, we soften our mind's gaze and open to the vast awareness that surrounds us. And this is a relational meditation where the present moment is our home base. We always come back to the here and now, resting in awareness, and our invitations follow our clients' innate spirituality as the guide to their transformation. Our own mindfulness practice is fundamental in the ability to unlock the magic of psychotherapy, because if we aren't practiced in shifting away from our ordinary mind and opening to awake awareness, then the magic of therapy will continue to be dulled. And so in our own personal life, separate from holding space for clients, really being mindful with ourselves, noticing our thoughts, bringing more awareness to our meaning making, wrapping our meaning making with love, validating our experience. It makes sense to me that you're trying to figure this out, or it makes sense to me that you're angry. Just saying that to ourselves. And then taking a breath and letting go of the mind and opening into a more expanded place of consciousness within ourselves. So instead of trying to change our clients, really what we're doing here is inviting them to be more of who they are. So affirming our trust in their innate wisdom, we can invite them to welcome everything that arises. So when we're affirming our trust in their innate wisdom, we are trusting that everything that is present within them holds a wisdom, holds a spiritual intelligence that is the key to their transformation. And the more welcoming we are of whatever arises, the more that deep wisdom will start to be heard. And this is where we start to experience that unlocking of that magic and the organic movement towards health that's so, so beautiful and profound. So, for example, if a client doesn't know what they want or need, we might invite them to just close their eyes and just notice that they don't know. It's okay to not know. This is such a nonviolent invitation to just be with the not knowing, where sometimes therapists might have an impulse to try to offer a suggestion or to give them some solution when a client doesn't know. But being with not knowing is actually important on the path to knowing. If a client feels disconnected or detached or disassociated, we can invite them to just notice the detachment, notice the disassociation and disconnection, and invite them to just be with themselves in that disconnection without trying to change it, without trying to pull them back in. It's okay to feel disconnected, right? Let's just attune to this disconnection. And this is the subtle attunement, the direct experience of what's actually happening now without trying to change a client. If a client is scared or angry or trying to figure out a solution, whatever their experience is, invite them to be with all of themselves from awake awareness. So we start by inviting them into direct experience, just being with what is. And the next step is we invite them to wrap that experience with awake awareness, with love, with validation, with a welcoming quality. From there, what unlocks is this beautiful unfolding of their process, of their inherent and organismic movement towards health. So this is really an invitation for clients to connect with their own energy. And so this is what's going to really support you from not stopping to giving your own energy away, right? So when a client is reconnected with their own energy, we're not crossing that sacred boundary, giving our energy away. So this might begin with the mind. If the client is in their mind and is sharing a lot of thoughts, like what I was saying in my story in the beginning of this with the therapist who was consulting with me, maybe we just invite the client to close their eyes and just notice that their mind is thinking, that their mind is searching. Their mind has a lot of stories. It's okay to have stories. It's okay to think. This is part of the human condition. We don't want to go in there and start rearranging the thinking. We just want to invite the client to shift into their witness so they can see their thoughts more clearly. And this is really what supports them in increasing consciousness, where they can actually discover their own solution from their own awareness and from their own sovereign will. If a client is in a big emotional experience, we can invite them to just make room for their emotions and to allow their emotions to move through them, right? Or if a client is even holding in their emotions, capping off their emotions, we can invite them to notice that they're capping off their emotions in their throat and just bring more awareness to the way their body relates to their emotions. And this is also true with sensations. If a client has a pit in their stomach, we can invite them to just notice the pit. So come into direct experience with the pit without trying to change it or fix it or figure it out. Just notice the pit. Let it know that you see it, that you're listening. It's okay to feel this pit. And from here, this is where the movement and the metabolization starts to occur. And so we're also staying in our own energy. So as we're guiding the therapy, we are being a clear mirror of reflection. This is the most powerful way to honor the sacred boundary is through our reflective skills. Many of the skills we learned in our first year of graduate school with reflective listening. But what I'm suggesting here is that your reflective listening isn't just a skill that you do. It's not just a tool. It actually is a way that you keep the therapeutic container clean because you're offering your clients words back to them. So now they're receiving their words back to them, but because you're holding space from awake awareness, their words are actually filtered through awake awareness and they can see them with more clarity. They can see themselves with more clarity. That's one way to reflect is with words, word for word reflections. But another way is to reflect how a client seems, to be a clear mirror of how they seem. And so, again, back to this example at the beginning of this course with the therapist who is describing their client as talking a lot for long stretches of time, we might say to them, it seems like when you talk, you speed up and you don't take a breath. And I'm wondering, what do you notice about yourself? That's being a clear mirror of reflection, seeing the client accurately as they are without judgment, without trying to change them. Open to awake awareness. When we sit in awake awareness, we're more likely to stay in our own energy because we're more seated in ourselves, we're more seated in our chair, as opposed to being in our mind and over in our client's world trying to figure them out. Breathe and mobilize any contraction or stuckness that we feel in our body. And this really creates inner spaciousness within ourselves. So we're not holding anything in. The more inner spaciousness that we can create, the more spacious our container is, which allows more awareness to be the guide of the transformation. And similarly, we can also use our body sensations as intuitive insight about the client. And so this might be well, first, let me say anything that we experience when we're sitting with a client that we weren't experienced before we sat with the client is intuition about the client. So even if the client isn't feeling the same thing that we're feeling, it's important that we honor what we're experiencing in our body. So for example, if I'm sitting with a client and I notice that my solar plexus starts to tense up, and I ask my client what they notice in their body and they don't share with me that their solar plexus is tight, I might just ask, and I'm wondering, what do you notice right here in your solar plexus? And maybe they say nothing, or maybe they say, oh, it's actually tight. Either way, I've used my information from my body as intuitive information, and I just brought the consciousness of tight solar plexus into the therapeutic container, which fills out the container with more clarity so that nothing is being stopped or held. And I'm part of that container, and I don't want to stop or hold anything from opening in that container. When you feel an impulse to fix or help or change your client, just really breathe through and keep creating more spaciousness as opposed to following that impulse. It will really help you in differentiating from your own ordinary mind and from your conditioned self. And lastly, stay client-led. This is so important. To stay client-led means that we need to know what the client wants for themselves. I've heard a lot of therapists say that they are client-led, but really what ends up happening is they think they're following the client, but they're really using their assumptions about what they think the client wants. And anytime we use our assumptions, we're crossing over that sacred boundary and we will start to give our energy away. So, to really stay in our own energy, we need to ask the client what they want for themselves. So, once we understand their pattern of distress or what's happening with them in this moment, and we've reflected and we've stayed present with them and we're in our own awake awareness, we might ask, given all of this, what is it that you really want for yourself? And this sparks their will, and it really encourages them and reinforces for them how to stay in their own energy. And this prevents us from burning out, and it supports bigger transformation because it's coming from them. Keep creating space for your clients to open to themselves over the course of therapy. So, with accurate reflections and being an accurate witness, clients can begin to find their own way through their patterns. Remember, they're swimming in these patterns. It is the water they are swimming in. So, when you see them accurately and reflect them accurately back to themselves, they can start to really wake up to themselves and start to find their way through their patterns on their own. When your invitations affirm your trust in your client's wisdom, they will begin to trust themselves too. And this is when therapy gets really energizing and really invigorating and transformative. As they open to themselves, just continue to contact them as they are. And clients will learn to regulate their nervous system and deepen into contact as we stay present with themselves and with them in this way. It's important to remember that healing occurs from the client's own awake awareness being brought to their pain. This is what transmutes their pain and transmutes their stuck energy. So a client will move from being like stuck in their energy to being more fluid, from being more protected in their thoughts and their habits to being more open, from being hardened to being soft, from being confused to being clear. And, a healer is somebody who reminds a client or reminds another person of their own inner source of healing. That is really what a healer is. Somebody who reminds others that they're already whole and that they have their own source of healing within them. And so if we think of ourselves as a healer who heals and fixes, then we're going to feel exhausted and drained. But if we think about ourselves as a healer whose presence reminds others of their wholeness and reminds others of their own sovereign source of healing, then the therapeutic container is magical. It really is a sacred moment of full embodiment when a client comes back to their true nature. It's such a beautiful return. Clients will say, I feel more like myself than I've ever remember feeling. And to me, what they're saying in that moment is, I'm back home in myself. I'm not following my conditioned patterns. I'm not hyper identified with my mind. My nervous system is regulated. I'm embodied. I can see clearly and I can engage with the environment as the environment is, not through my projections, not by trying to change. So what's next here? Yeah, the Awakened Therapist Level 1 certification is going to be starting in September, and I'd love to invite you to join us. You'll learn practical tools to explore the transcendent in therapy as you support your clients in returning to their true nature. You'll learn how to stay in your own energy and feel so energized by your work as your clients experience bigger breakthroughs. It's 6 months of live and asynchronous learning that's 100% online, so it's really easy to integrate in your life from anywhere in the world. We'll meet from September 2025 to February 2026, and the live sessions will happen on the first Friday of each month from 10 to 12, and I'll be leading those. And you'll have a combination of lectures and demos from me with participants and practices and discussions. Live classes are recorded, so you can rewatch them as many times as you like. And asynchronous learning with recorded webinars will be in our online classroom for you to listen to in between sessions. So if you would like to join or like to learn more, you can scan this QR code and you can enroll today to get 10% off with the early bird discount. Early bird exclamation point is the promo code. And I really want to thank you for the beautiful work that you're offering the world. You're so needed. This work is so, so powerful, and you are so needed. And may your work be a reflection of your most awake resource self.